and only a few others shared his secret of the ooze. Here's your look at the brand new Mattel Turtles of Grayskull He-Man, the most powerful mutant in the universe. What happens when the most powerful man in the universe is doused with mutagenic ooze from another dimension? Nothing good. With He-Man now a mindless pawn in Skeletor's hand, will this be the end of Eternia? Poor Prince Adam. Pretty sure he's now atomic. Before, of course, we get a closer look at He-Man. The tape measure tells us that the figure's about 5.5 inches in height, or he's about 14 centimeters tall. You want your He-Man comparisons? You got your He-Man comparisons. Here's what the figure looks like with the Master Universe Origins He-Man. About the same size of figure, maybe if anything the Origins is just a tad bit taller, but the one that we're now getting from the Turtles of Grayskull is a much bulkier figure. Of course, he's got mutagen ooze running through his veins. He's about the same size beef-wise as what we're getting here from the cartoon collection. So either one of the He-Mans from this line would fit fine in with the ones we're getting from the Turtles of Grayskull, depending on where you want to put these on the shelf. Speaking, though, of the fact that this is now also the second figure that we're looking at from the Turtles of Grayskull, it probably would make then some sense to bring in the first figure that we've already had a look at. So here's what He-Man looks like, along with Leonardo. He-Man, sadly, isn't heavy on accessories. The figure only comes included with the same mini comic as the one we got with Leonardo, and he also comes included with his big clubbing mace. Sandwiched, though, somewhere in the middle. The figure also comes included with, once again, that useless piece of paper that Mattel continues to print off. Let's just waste and destroy all the trees just so we can get this little piece of paper just to tell us that we can remove and swap out the arms, the lower torso, and the feet if you want to mix and match these with other He-Man figures. They could have also honestly put this on the back of the packaging, something that you guys have also weighed in on too. Why are we just wasting paper when we already have enough of the paper on the back of the packaging? I'm getting off my soapbox now. The figure, though, also comes included with his mini-comic. The mini-comic is the same one, though, that got included with Leonardo by the power of pizza. So, if you happen to have destroyed the corner like I destroyed the corner, the figure at least comes with a mini-comic that is just a simple repeat. Still, though, I don't know. I don't love the artwork inside. I love it about half of it. I like all the things that are relating to the Masters characters, and yet, though, the Ninja Turtles themselves look wonky to me. That's a nice way of putting it. I mean, again, I love the artwork. I mean, look at Shredder and Krang up the top corner there. I would love just an artwork done here of this, of just these characters. Or again, like if you want to take the Masters and take them in a different direction, I mean, again, I would just be loving the idea of doing a Masters comic with this sort of style of artwork. Like, just get a gander at He-Man on the back of the packaging or the back of the comic. That looks fantastic. The thing, though, about it, though, is that the selling point of this crossover is the fact that the Turtles are now in Eternia. And I just don't think the Turtles look at all great in the actual comic that comes included with them. By the way, though, the comic is going to be continued. The Belly of the Beast. It's also going to come include with Wave 2. So all of Wave 1, I'm gathering, is going to come include with the exact same comic. All of Wave 1 consisting of Leonardo, He-Man, Donatello, and Man-at-Arms. We're about halfway across. I mean, inadvertently, I'm now just going to be looking at the top two. We're going to be looking at the bottom two, covering with my hand in upcoming videos of both Donatello and Man-at-Arms. Stay tuned for that. Certainly stay tuned for right now, at least, because the figure also comes included with one other accessory. Surprised that he didn't come with some variation of his power sword, with maybe some spikes or wrapped around barbed wire. I don't know. What would be a mutated version of the power sword? Maybe the one we got from the 2000X series. What a terrible power sword that is. Getting off my soapbox. The figure, though, instead comes included with sort of a guarded, hand-holding mace club. It's got lots of spikes all around it, so it could inflict some serious damage if it ever made impact with anybody. Being the fact that now this is a mutated pawn for Skeletor, he's going to be more to the bad guys, the negative side of the duos, as opposed to he's not going to be teaming up with the Turtles anytime soon. But this does go fit into his hands. One of the benefits, at least, of these figures so far is that they actually do have gripping hands on both sides. So if you wanted to, it doesn't have to necessarily, you don't have to commit to the idea that He-Man has to always hold the sword or the mace. See, I'm doing it already. Has to always hold the mace on this side. He can easily hold it also on this side as well. Now, if you thought for a second, there must simply be storage. There's got to be storage. There is sadly no storage. You can't put this anywhere. I mean, obviously, a hoop would be very difficult, because if you were to put a loop, how would that even clip around it? But maybe if they had maybe just put a little hook here, something that could have clipped onto the back where you could have clipped on the mace, just if you didn't want to have the figure displayed with it. But sadly, there isn't a place to store it on He-Man. We'll put it off to the side for at least right now. It's going to come back when we look at the figure in final looks. Getting, though, a closer look at He-Man. I mean, one thing he carries over from at least the idea of Ninja Turtles is the fact that this one does now have a bandana. The bandana is black to match his dark now soul. And of course, one of the neat things about this figure is not only does he have all these neat painted in veins that run all the way down the sides of his arms, all across the front of his chest, nowhere anywhere on his legs, unfortunately. But the neat thing also is the fact that the figure is using translucent purple plastic. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, translucent purple plastic, that's got to be a big no-no. It looks to be the case that they are using at least opaque plastic for all the things that are hinge joints. Speaking of hinge joints, though, boy, did I ever have a hard time, and I'm still having a hard time to bend the arms here of He-Man. The joints are extremely tight. If you find you're getting this figure for yourself and there's a lot of resistance when trying to bend the arm, do what I maybe did and maybe just run a few passes with the hairdryer just to soften up the plastic just a little bit, because you don't want any one of those to break. Head sculpt wise, for a mutated He-Man, I guess it does the job nicely. I mean, I like the artwork really on the back of the page of the comic. I don't know if it drives as well nicely here in an actual figure of him, but man, it's a really interesting looking take to He-Man. He's got a grimaced face, big red eyes. I mean, I would love to see a faker version of this guy. Now, would, I guess, a faker version of He-Man now be a positive He-Man? No, it doesn't work that way. We're not in the Mirrorverse. He's simply just mutated by ooze. Speaking of mutated ooze, though, I can't help but draw the point as well that the figure doesn't come included with a canister. I mean, obviously, he comes included with the mace. Now, Donatello came included with the guard and the two swords, the two halved swords. And technically, he also came included with a half shell on the back of his body that turned as well, converted into a shield. Couldn't He-Man have afforded? He's the most powerful man in the universe, whether he's mutated or not. Could he not have just had a little tiny canister of ooze that came included with the figure? I would certainly have loved to see that. But what I do really like to see is the fact that they did use this translucent purple plastic. It looks really good. It's, though, a little bit more translucent in some of the areas like his legs. Not that really I can run my hand behind it and you can really see my hand straight through the plastic. But it's a really nice use of this translucent purple. It really, in a way, makes the figure glow quite a lot. I do feel like the colors are jarring a little bit, but that worked quite well. I don't know really how, again, it's kind of like the same mentality as Secret of the Ooze. How does Super Shredder develop all this additional armor? The same way for He-Man, how does He-Man all of a sudden have different armor with spikes all across his gauntlets and all across his front of his belt? Unless perhaps maybe Skeletor gave him the armory. But I'm thinking that based on just the last page of the comic, it doesn't look as all like maybe Skeletor, maybe he has. I mean, I'm looking at kind of the way it's described right now. He-Man's only really more in a silhouette. But maybe they did actually give him armor after he mutated, because it makes no sense at all that just green ooze would give him all these spikes across the bandolier armor that he has, not to mention spikes on his gauntlet. All right, off my soapbox. I do like the coloring of the orange. I like the way that that's been handled with the H logo that he has on the front. Some of the orange, unfortunately, doesn't look like it's super sharp. Like they probably could have used a couple more paints, especially some of the spikes there on the top here. You can see some of the black plastic still bleeding through. But all in all, like, it's a nice looking He-Man. It's a very different looking He-Man, though also the fact he's got these big giant monkey arms as well. Speaking of his monkey arms, and I guess speaking of articulation for the figure, He-Man's head, first of all, is on a ball joint. If you can overlook the fact he's got this long now bandana on the back that's going to get hooked at times, it does technically rotate all the way around. The head looks down, looks up, and it also rocks back and forth as well. So all the same stuff that you would expect with Masters figures gets also packed along with the Turtles of Grayskull figures as well. Arms rotate all the way around here on He-Man. It's also the same on both sides as well. The arms do hinge out at 90 degrees, so no problems there. Again, the only real problem I had, still continues to be a problem, is the hinge joint on his elbows. If you have this He-Man for yourself, let me know if you've also had really tight elbows. Not you, the actual figure. Maybe you have tight elbows. I have loose elbows. But the arms do rotate back and forth. He-Man's hands do rotate all the way around. There's a hinge back and forth there as well. Just a straight swivel back and forth. Legs are on ball joints. Once again, they hinge outward. You can take the legs forward and back on those. Mild swivel at the top. Single hinge again on the knee. Only allows the lower leg to rotate back and forth. There's rotation here. And there's also hinge back and forth. I know I didn't really spend a whole lot of time talking about the boots. We'll talk about them right now. Sort of an inverted color scheme here. So now you have black boots with sort of the roping or threading here done in brown. And interestingly enough, he sort of has these, well, he has one ripped boot that exposes his tiny little piggies. I don't know how many of these are going to the market, but I think if I was the market, I would be closing shop early. These anyways, by the way, hinge back and forth. I did notice, though, that the ankle on this leg is a little on the looser side, and I did notice that this knee happens to be, of course, on the other side of the street, does also have a little bit of looseness there as well. Other than that, though, it's a nice looking He-Man. I don't know if we are going to be getting ourselves a Skeletor version of this. Again, we're not in Mirrorverse, so we're not going to be getting a Skeletor that goes around with gift baskets to the rest of the people of Eternia. That's not going to happen. But I wonder if we are going to be getting ourselves a slight variation of Skeletor. We are getting as well a Shredder. The Shredder looks fantastic because it kind of does, in a way, remind me of the Shredder from the Playmates days. Shirtless Shredder is all win for me. Interestingly, on the back of the packaging, all this time of talking about the back of the packaging, let's just bring it in right now. The little slime pit is a throwback to one of the original Masters play sets. I wonder if we are going to be getting a variation of this to go along for the Shredder. I certainly hope so. He-Man looks really neat on the back of the packaging. That Shredder looks awesome. I can't wait to have a look at this guy. But you know what? Again, I'm really liking this line. But again, I feel like I'm liking it more so for the Masters figures and maybe not as much for the Turtle figures. It is, after all, Turtles in Grayskull, Turtles from Grayskull. But I feel, honestly, I'm more interested in, like, the He-Man than I am maybe the Leonardo. It's a weird crossover, the fact that they would take the two brands, both 80s brands, and combine the two together. Whether you feel the idea that you may not want to be picking up everything, I mean, maybe, again, like, if you're only just a Masters fan, you might just find yourself passing on the Turtles altogether. But I gotta say, like, the Turtle line is interesting, the fact that they would find a way to merge that with He-Man. The success, though, of this line may not actually be weighted on more so the idea of people picking up the Turtles. I mean, again, like, I would only pick up the Turtles, I feel, just to say that I've completed it again. Obviously, if I'm getting the Donatello and the Leonardo, I would like to finish at least the rest of the four brothers, get Raphael and Michelangelo that are probably going to be making up the next wave. But based on the second wave of figures, some of which are already ordered, like Ram-Man, that Ram-Man looks fantastic. I'm definitely more interested, honestly, in more of the Masters figures of this crossover than I am actually the half-shell heroes. Well, if this is what they did to He-Man, I'd hate to see what they did with Cringer. Could you imagine a mutated version of Battle Cat? Oh, just the idea of that alone. That would be interesting, but I don't want to think too far ahead into this line. So far, from what at least I've seen, I think we're, 2 or 3 waves into this series. So far, at least, again, the ones I'm the most interested in is honestly just the Masters. Yeah, the Ninja Turtles are okay, and maybe my opinions of that may change as we get further into this line. We're obviously going to be looking at Donatello in an upcoming review, not to push too ahead of He-Man here, but I think like the Turtles aren't maybe as interesting and maybe aren't as creative as maybe some of the stuff that they're doing with the Masters figures. Though I do like the look of He-Man. The big large arms is one thing that also really works well with his figure. I mean, obviously they could have just simply used He-Man's body as it was with the Origins and they just colored it differently in the translucent purple plastic. Giving him his oversized arms like this does drive home again the idea that he's a mutated monster. Speaking of monsters, though, again, I don't know how do you mutate armor as well? It's the same sort of silly mentality that we had with Super Shredder. I mean, yeah, he was mutated, but it doesn't necessarily mean it mutates his costuming as well. And it doesn't also mean that you swap him in with Kevin Nash. Anyways, that's a discussion for another day. I do like the colors for He-Man. They're jarring and they don't quite work, but I guess that's the whole idea. His bright neon green hair is a bit of an eyesore, not to mention the big orange spikes that he has sticking out from his armor. And yet, surprisingly, everything works, even though none of it really works. The one thing that doesn't quite work for me is the fact that they decided to give him a big clubbing mace. Could they not have found a different way to come up with a creative power sword for him? Or maybe Skeletor took the power sword and they just gave him some clubbing mace. If he's only just a minion anyways of Skeletor, I guess he doesn't really need the power sword. What do you guys think of the figure? Let me know down below in the comments section. Have you guys been collecting any of the Turtles of Grayskull figures? And let me know what you guys think of this line so far. If you yet have picked up any of these, let me know based on some of these reviews that we've done so far. Is this the line you guys could see yourselves getting into? Whether you are a TMNT fan, whether you're a Motu fan, whether you're a fan of both, is this a line you could see yourselves getting into? Or is just a really, really weird subcategory line for either one of the franchises and it's just a total pass? If you guys did also as well want to get any one of these figures, I did find the first wave at least over at Entertainment Earth. I think the second wave is still on a pre-order, but if you guys are interested, get the first wave. They're stocked and currently on their site, and using the link down below in the video description will save you 10% off. Also, again, already mentioned, we are going to be looking at Donatello and Man-at-Arms. I don't know why I'm having a hard time getting that all out. We're probably going to alternate it, too. Considering that we started things off first with a Ninja Turtle, then we jumped to a Master Universe character, we're probably then going to jump back to a Ninja Turtle before we wrap up the remaining of these reviews with Man-at-Arms. I know I sort of have already spilled the beans so far of what we're going to be doing, but at least, hopefully, you guys will still want to come back to this channel. Make sure, of course, you're doing all those things of hitting the subscribe button down below, that you're doing as well the thing of turning on the bell notification, but most importantly, you're doing the main thing of coming back here on a regular basis. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.